And at this time, I'd like to introduce Kevin Knott, and I'm going to read a short little bit about him. He's awesome. So Kevin is a graduate of Indiana University School of Social Work with a Master of Social Work degree. He is a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed marriage and family therapist. He has over 30 years of mental health practice, providing clinical care to individuals, families, group treatment modalities. He also has clinical practice experience in outpatient services, geriatric inpatient psychiatric services, and emergency mental health treatment. Kevin is presently employed with Hancock Counseling and Psychiatric Services as a licensed clinical social worker providing outpatient mental health treatment to adolescents, adults, and families. He is married to his wonderful wife, Anne, for many years. Since they no longer have children in the home, they have two Pomeranians who require their care and attention. In his spare time, he enjoys watching sports, hiking, trails, and anything to do with American history, and he loves to travel with his wife. At this time, I'll turn the presentation over to Kevin.
Good evening, everyone, and I'm glad that you have chosen to be with us tonight. I want to talk a little bit about, over the next 30 minutes or so, about anger management for adolescents and for adults. And I would like to cover initially some information that I would like to share for adolescents. And I would hope perhaps there are some adults and adolescents that have maybe signed in to be with us tonight, because I think the information would be important for both the adolescents and parents as well. And then secondly, I want to talk about some information in regards to anger management for adults. And when I think of anger management and anger management skills and training, I think of the fact that anger, of course, is an emotion that we all experience in our life. Undoubtedly, we may experience it from time to time, whether we're at home, whether with friends, whether we're at work. And oftentimes, anger itself is given a negative connotation, when in actuality, anger is an emotion, is an expression from within, and there's also physiological responses that occur with anger expression as well. So what I find in my work is helping other individuals to better define anger, to develop coping skills to use, and also to understand how to regulate and to release anger in appropriate and manageable ways. And I would also think that probably because of society, particularly in more recent times, and when we're additionally stressed by things in our life, such as financial matters, such as employment, in regards to the pandemic that we're currently in, no doubt that we see as professionals a rise in anger expression and individuals needing help with expressing appropriately so and managing and handling anger. So on the foundation principles would be that anger is an emotion, is healthy to express, and there are clearly some proven and helpful ways to express anger. And where I would like to begin the talk tonight, I'll move along to the first slide. Back up a little bit. Of course, there's my contact information at Hancock Counseling in Greenfield. And I've been with Hancock Counseling and Psychiatry in this office a little over 3 years doing outpatient work, as Jess said. What I would like to talk about first with us that are together tonight is I'd like to talk about some foundation principles about what are typical teenage behaviors. Because when I think of typical teenage behaviors, I think of a set of characteristics or behaviors and or expression of emotion that occurs as a part of development, a part of growth, a part of maturation, if you would, for teenagers. And all of us that are adults certainly have worked through this process ourselves during our lifetime. And I would just like you to look at some of the examples that I've listed on the screen this evening, because surely each one of us that are parents that have children in our homes or have raised children and or think back on our own life experiences have experienced a variety of these behaviors which are normal and typical. When I think of the behaviors, I think of the display and the, if you would, the showing of the behavior through normal maturation and growth. And we as adults, we play a key role in helping the adolescents in our lives to be able to master and to be able to utilize some of the skills that are necessary to help them through each of these stages. For example, how many of us have not raised an adolescent that did not test the limits of independence? How many of us have not done that ourselves as well? In those situations, there may be engagement with the parent, there may be arguing that occurs, and the teen will say no or in a defiant way sometimes and appear to make decisions independently. Let me reassure you that all of these behaviors are normal in a sense, and as we learn to cope with the behaviors, we better are able to teach our teenagers and role model for them if we would in our daily lives. We also know on the other end of the spectrum that our teens enjoy spending time with peers through friendships, romantic relationships, because they become important to them in order to define who they are, in order to be able to explore their own desires, wishes, and form relationships. So I often say to parents, if you believe it's a healthy relationship, if you believe that there's benefit from the relationship with your adolescent for friends or in romantic relationships or in other types of relationships, it's important to support the teen. It's important to encourage them to develop interest outside of our family home because that helps them better define who they are as an individual and helps them to better define how they're going to relate to the world that they live within. Sometimes we as parents also experience what we call like a tug of war. And please, if there's any adolescents listening tonight, any teenagers, I wanted to mention these typical behaviors in a way to express that in reality, if you experience some of these events or behaviors in your life, it is not abnormal. It is a part of normal growth and maturation. So oftentimes, a tug of war can occur when maybe our teen comes to us and asks for assistance. We give them the information, they follow through, and externally, it's kind of like a feel good for us as parents, but internally, it means more to us because we are teaching our teens and role modeling the behavior that's appropriate for them. Other times, a part of the tug of war is when our kids, our teens, don't feel that they need the input from us as parents as readily and as often. And I oftentimes, when I talk to parents about this issue, I oftentimes caution the parent that the communication link needs to be reciprocal 2 ways. We need to understand where our teen is coming from. We want to communicate, of course, some boundaries, some parameters that are healthy, but we also want to allow the teen to express himself openly to us. So as you see, these initial typical behaviors, they're all important to recognize as a part of maturation and as a part of development. Now, when a problem occurs within some of these typical behaviors is when maybe we might need to address some emotions, and certainly anger is one of them. And how many of us could say that we know our teens do want privacy and they do want to be able to have respect for themselves and for others that they may connect with? In the world that we live in today, we know that social media is a very important part of its existence for all of us. It's important for us as adults and for our teens to learn appropriate ways to carry on conversations, to interact on social media. So most of us as parents have some basic rules or perceptions about what we would like our teens to do when they're exploring on social media. And we know that as social media has become more and more an important part of our lives every day, that unfortunately there are some social media sites, outlets, connections, if you would, that we know that aren't appropriate for our teens based upon the way that we might establish our home and the rules that we have. So I would encourage, though, when this occurs, that parents have a dialogue, gather data, input from your teenager, sit down, talk about it, try to reason through, and find a way to resolve any conflicts that occur without seemingly taking away in totality the teen's ability to have initiative and to be able to make choices and decisions on their own. Because it's really important for our teens, I believe, to learn the behaviors that are acceptable that we model to them as well, and that they learn while they're growing up in our homes. And for all of us, a good check and balance. This is normal growth and development, the teen behaviors that we've looked at briefly here tonight. But it's really important to keep an eye out for any mental health issues that might develop. Considerations would include changes in daily functioning, meaning hygiene, personal hygiene, doing chores, interacting around the house, interacting with friends, all of those things that are normal to the daily routine for a teen. If there's significant enough changes in the daily routine, there's mood changes or increased anxiety, it's really important for us as parents to take note of that. And I would say that probably most teenagers that I have had the privilege to work with in my career who exhibit a lot of issues around anger management may A, have mood disorders or depression, B, may have increased anxiety over situations or events in their life, and increased anxiety with teens can often be caused by external factors that we as adults experience on a different level. But we need to keep in mind that our teens are still learning and still wanting to gain skill sets to deal with the anxiety. So when there are mood changes, anxiety issues, and or a change in their daily routine that you're concerned about, please pay attention to and be in tune with, and if necessary, seek out some professional help for you and for your teen. Now, I will say that teens normally make decisions through a center in the brain that we call the emotional center of the brain. And that's because for a teenager, the brain is still developing and maturing, as well as the teen is growing and maturing in physical ways. So we can imagine if a lot of the decisions made by teens, not all, but a lot, come from the emotional center of the brain, that tells us that surely there will be changes, there are ups and downs, and there are problem areas to work through. Probably by the time we get to the age of 25 to 28, we begin fully to make decisions from the decision-making, reasoning, and the front part of the brain, which is a control center, which also controls impulse control as well. And normally when that occurs, decisions are made in a smoother, better way. And I've not met one teenager that did not want to really make good decisions. You know, there might be external problems, there might be other causes in regards to why they might be struggling. But most teens, when it gets down to the brass tacks, I would call, of working with somebody in treatment, really want to make good decisions, and parents, they do pay attention and listen, even though they may not verbalize that back to you. So remember that when you have a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old who may physically be growing and maturing outwardly, the brain is still growing and developing inwardly, and the frontal lobe complex is not normally used for decision making until a teen becomes maybe 25, 28, 29 years of age as an adult. And I would like to go on to anger management skills for teens. Each one of our families, each family that we live in, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, we have expectations about how anger should be managed. Teens often pay attention to how we behave over what we might say. And that not only applies to teens, there's a lot of research that demonstrates our behavior usually is in the forefront. We remember behaviors. Our mind usually has a way of taking photographs, if you would, of behaviors over time that we see in and around us. So it's always important as parents that we work to keep our behavior and our verbal response intact. And each family is different oftentimes in the expectations of how to manage anger. Another aspect to look at is anger and aggression. Remember when I said earlier that anger is an emotion that's expressed, and it is an emotion that is expressed often, or more often that we might think in our daily life. And anger in itself is not negative. Anger is healthy. It's the way it's channeled and the way it's expressed and dealt with. So it's better that we err on the side to help our teens learn to express the anger versus being aggressive or combative. And it's important that we teach assertiveness skills, being able to speak up, role play through situations with our teens, and how to help our teens not being taken advantage of. Those are just a few examples, and there's many more. Now, it's important to pay attention to the body physiologically. When we know that there's a sudden increase of a heart rate, clenched fist, or a flushed face, or pronounced verbalizations, which are maybe loud and can be in some ways interfering with the ability to express anger well, then we know when the physical signs occur that we probably need to intervene and do something with. And it's always important to teach our kids problem-solving skills, the pros and cons of how to take care of things in their lives. As I said, teens often pick up and use adult role model behaviors. So role modeling, if we are yelling more often than we should, some people think as well, swearing heavily, or breaking things, tearing up things, we can't really expect our teens to control their anger easily if we're not providing a good example. It's always good, of course, to talk through rationally and calmly. Now, if we can't do that at the moment when a problem comes up, and we're in the midst of an outburst or an anger expressive episode, it's always important to remember to tie those aspects in, if not at that moment. And sometimes I often tell parents, if it's really a charged argument, it's more than okay to allow a little bit of time to go before we work on resolution, resolving, talking through, because in order to talk calmly, we've all got to be on a level page and working together. So it's not a bad idea to work out with your teen ahead of time, if in fact that it occurs, that you kind of have a signal with each other that you might use. Remember what I said about behavior and about seeing our behavior. Our body language is a good way to exemplify that. So if we can come up with an example, or frankly say, to our teen, I think we need to take a time out a minute after an explosive episode or verbalization. It's okay to do that. Matter of fact, I would encourage that. But don't forget to come back together and talk about rationally and calmly and give examples of the behavior in ways that you would like to see them solve it in the future. Strategies or techniques that we as parents can use to help our teen understand about accepting responsibility. What I tried to come up with here, and for you teens that might be listening in, this is not to be in any way a punishment to you, even though it may seem so. What these different responsibilities to understanding and taking responsibility, sometimes we need to key in with our behavior, and that works for us as adults as too. If we want things to change in our lives, we need to find a way to hold ourselves accountable. So in order to do so, electronics. Electronics is often a big issue with teens, preteens as well nowadays, and a lot of even our younger kids that are using iPads, other type of electrical devices, even at a preschool age. If we find a way to negotiate or bargain or set the rules where we need to as parents with electronics, and if any of these that I have listed here may need to be used in order to exemplify an example, one thing that I would encourage though, we as parents, when we do so, we need not to talk about responsibilities or consequences, if you would, if we're angry ourselves. The message is received much better if we're calmer and collected with our own thinking and we're on target in dealing with these situations. And we as parents, we know that when we talk to our teen about maybe you're on electronics too much, maybe it's something that's making you feel angry, irritable, on edge, we've got to find a way to bring to the conversation about how electronic use can be different, can be effective, and can be healthy. So we've got to counterbalance that when we think about, and with friend time. You know, if we have one of our teens that you think that may benefit from a little more time at home or balance their schedule between home, friends, academics, sports, other things, that's a good way to approach that. I think that I want to skip down to natural consequences. Sometimes it's really effective for all of us, and we can teach our teens that natural consequences through choice of behavior is a way maybe to begin to reduce the anger that's occurring and challenge our teens to understand maybe the mistake they made, how to work through it, how to think through problem-solving skills. The one on the last one on the page that I have here, assign extra responsibilities as learning experience. A caution with that. I don't think we as parents serve ourselves well if we come out of a heated argument with our teen and then we want to give them 3 or 4 extra chores all at once. That's not the idea that I'm talking about here. I'm talking about having the conversation once things have calmed, talk about ways to change behavior, and talk about how an added responsibility for a time period could be a learning experience. And I say for a time period because we as parents don't want to continue adding more and more responsibilities on our teens' back in order to hope that they would change their behavior. I think we have to be realistic and reasonable. So, for example, if I were to tell one of my kids, if I were to tell my son when he was young that you're grounded for the next 4 years, seriously, you think I'm going to be able to manage that and I was going to say to control that, to manage it, to be able to play it out and to be able to stay on top of that? No, I'm not. So it's important to be able to talk about those extra responsibilities as learning experiences when we're calm and we're settled. And sometimes I found some of those best extra responsibilities are not learned in my home, but were learned in the neighbors or somebody else's home that I encouraged my son to follow through with, and to be able to do those extra responsibilities for a time limit, because we want the lesson to be valuable, but we don't want to run it till it's dry or run it into the ground. So those are just some thoughts that I had. And moving on, preventing any future problems. We don't want to be overprotective, and we won't want to be too permissive as parents. We want to be able to balance those things out. I'll let you look at the screen here. I just looked, the time is really moving along now. So I want to be able to get to some of the other things we want to talk about for adults for just a few minutes. And feel free, if you want to take any pictures of some of the screens, I'm okay with that. Anger management techniques for kids. Some of the things that we need to do ourselves. Here's one I'd like to mention. Practice relaxation techniques. Deep breathing, and I call it breathing 4x4 square. That means sitting in a chair with our hands on our lap, inhale 4 seconds, hold 4 seconds, exhale 4 seconds. So inhale, hold, exhale, and repeat 10 times. Relaxation techniques work when the level of anger or frustration is not maxed out, usually a lower to moderate level. Journaling, any patterns that are developing, any increased stress with school, family, relationships. And I mentioned the next to the last one that begins with listening to music. If you see over to the right there, I have some apps that I've placed here that I think are pretty good apps that are good for teenagers. Calm, Headspace, and the third, it is called Stop, Breathe, and Think. So Stop, Breathe, and Think is the third app there. Know when to get help with anger. Is it consistent, violent, or being aggressive like we talked about before? Now, feel free. I'm going to leave the screen up for a couple of minutes here, and I think we probably need to move on to other portion of our topic tonight. Empowering parents, Center for Parenting Education, Am I Yelling? Any teens that are out there, I really think the Anger Workbook for Teens is really a neat resource to use because there's all kinds of activities about dealing with anger and frustration. And the lady who wrote it is a PhD and works in mental health. It's a good one, a good resource. Maybe Mindshift. I didn't mention that as an app a while ago. That's a good one to maybe use. And the last one there, therapistaid.com. On therapistaid.com, there are several different resources. If you want to take notes here for a minute, these are a few that I picked out, the resources within therapistaid.com. And I believe those are free to print off too. So if you want any of those sheets that are there that would help to help your adolescent, please do so. Jess, do you think I can move on now from this screen? Okay. I want to talk just a few short minutes, I think, about anger with adults. Got to go through this maybe a little more quickly, if that's all right. I apologize for the time. Inborn temperament. Are we wired? Do we exhibit quick temperament or irritability as adults? That's a think through for us as adults. When did it start? How did it materialize? And how did it grow? Were we raised with angry parents or in an environment as such? Family environment, being brought up in a chaotic, stressful environment, culture. And you know, when I put this down here, I see I've got a masculine culture and working environment that encourage macho response. And I looked at that later and I thought, okay, those are two things that relate to the male culture. And I thought through it. Yes, probably in the American culture, we have those two dynamics that often play into our anger. However, I will say, not all males and not males only. So it can affect us, whoever we are, as a part of our culture and development. And as I look real quickly on, other ways that anger becomes a part of our life is we might have found a situation in the past where anger provided us a short-term benefit. I don't really see that as an ongoing way to believe to perpetuate our anger. And maybe oftentimes we look back on those experiences and it really was a situation that did not benefit us. But we might have found a time, and so maybe that's why we might want to use anger again as an expression. Remember what I said earlier, it applies to adults too. Anger itself is not a negative emotion. It's how we manage, deal with, and utilize our coping skills to work through. And as you can see, the other two that I have listed here on the page, outburst, um, anger management, anger issues early in life. I want to go on to strategies for a few minutes. Some strategies. These strategies don't work for everyone, but some work for each of us. And they're behavioral in nature and cognitive a lot of times too. So that means we use we use our cognitive abilities to think through, to plan, to try to integrate some of these into our daily functioning that helps us improve. Strategies to calm one's angry. You notice I have the first one there, counting to 10 or more. Sometimes counting helps, and sometimes it does not help, depending on the intensity. And it's okay to not only count, but to get some space if we need to go away, certainly from a situation that makes us angry. Breathing techniques, as I talked about with kids earlier, teenagers. Repeat calming techniques. Take it easy, chill out. It's not a big deal. And the repetition, what it does do behaviorally, it starts to change or influence the way that we're thinking through. And this technique is really good to use prior to an explosive or anger outburst. So if we know if we're triggering towards anger, repeat to ourselves, I'm going to take it easy. I'm not going to let the situation get the best of me. Even though it seems like a big deal in the whole perspective of things, it's not. Also, picture in our mind calming images. Picture yourself being on an island beach as waves lap up to the shore, lying in a field with wildflowers, wherever you may go to get into your peace and safety zone. A lot of men that I talk to, it's usually things outdoors. It may have to do with sports. It may have to do with hunting or fishing, those sorts of things. I think with females, what might work in some ways might be images of sitting quietly by themselves near the shore, having a soft drink, being able to picture themselves away from the responsibilities that are stressing them at home. And for women, oftentimes, I think doing things like a warm bath, lighting candles, music, those work oftentimes for females. Use an app that helps. I mentioned Calm is an app that is used for all ages. Anger and irritability management skills is another, and Pacifica is a third. These are apps that I think that are really pretty good and well-rounded for adults. And if we can get a humorous spin on the situation, that can help sometimes. And as you notice, some of these are doing things and some are thinking things. It's important to work on both our thought processes cognitively and behaviorally, doing something to get ourselves out of the angry situation. Taking responsibility and effective coping. I just put these in here just so you might look at them and see if any of these probably have applied to all of us at one time or another and where they come from as far as their originality and how they affect us in our daily lives. Signs of getting angry. Focusing longer, annoying repetitive thoughts, getting grumpy over extended period of time. When we notice we have tensed or clenched muscles, our face, our jaw, or shoulders. Increased heart rate. Increased heart rate, I think, is a real good symptom to be aware of, because usually when the heart rate increases significantly, the anger is rushing quickly because the adrenaline is flowing through our body and pumps our bloodstream more. So I think watching for increased heart rate, watching our own feeling of our facial reactions, clenched fist, those kind of things, changes in breathing, deep inhale, tense exhale. Very good sign that anger is getting out of control, of the emotion itself. Isolating and shutting down. You notice that's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, but yes, that too. As I said, the rush of adrenaline, the flushed or red face, starting to feel demanding, feeling maybe that we are boxed in and we become more perfectionistic, not because we are a perfectionist, but because we feel we might be losing control. So in order to try to regain that control, we may attempt to be a perfectionist in relationship to others or situations that we feel like we want to control that may have something to do with anger. Um, some of the situations, and you can see those for yourself, that may trigger anger. I tried to pick some that I have often heard repetitively. And you know, there's one that's not on here that may be relevant to today's society. It may have to do with the pandemic that we're in and life changing so drastically, working from home, our kids, maybe a hybrid plan for school, maybe going to school, maybe having to come back home and study from home. All of those changes that we go through in our daily routine and our daily lives. And I wanted to throw this out real quickly. Some research that I've been reading about 1985 or 86, when, and I'm going back, but I think I want to mention this to parents because it is helpful to understand in our kids, I think. Anxiety for freshmen in high school. This has been a long-term study. So from 1985 or 86, the percentage was about 18% of our kids reported experiencing anxiety beginning the freshman year of high school. 4 years ago, it was 50%. The research is not out as to where it is today and where it's increased in the last 4 years, but undoubtedly, I would say it's much higher than 50%. So 4 years ago, 50% of our kids entering ninth grade in high school talked about the stress, the anxiety that often leads to feeling out of control and often can lead to anger. So if it was 50% then, imagine what it might be today because of our changing life situation in regards to the pandemic. With adults, find some safe space. Take a walk. Try to fight fair with partner. And actually, there's some literature out there, and I didn't put any down for the presentation tonight, but if you would Google rules for fighting fair with your partner, there is all kinds of material and books out there that's available. Asking yourself, do I really want to get riled up? Is this that big of a deal? Don't ruminate. That's a big one, I think. Not to ruminate, not to go over and over in your mind, not to let yourself stew about something. A good way to prevent anger escalation is to be able to talk through it, identify the feelings, identify the emotions you're experiencing, and where you might have felt you've been wrong. Reducing stress, some more ways to recharge your battery, work on self-worth, relaxation techniques. And I mentioned, the ones that I mentioned for relaxation techniques, meditation is pretty proven to work, not for everyone, but for a lot of people, breathing exercises, and the visualization. So behavior change, visualization, I think is really good for people who have very good memories. Because if we have good memories, and undoubtedly you're able to work through the file of your mind of events, times, etc., why not challenge yourself to do some visualization to help with reduction of stress and anxiety? We can always, all of us, work on improving our communication skills. Here's some resources that I wanted to leave here for adults. The Anger Control Workbook is a workbook put together by two individuals in mental health profession. Taming the Powerful Emotion of Anger. I've read that, I like it. Gary Chapman, mental health worker for many years. Anger Management for Everyone. Another book by someone in mental health. So those are resources for adults. And I think Jess, if people have questions or would like some of these resources, we'll have our contact information, I think, on a slide or two coming up. Is it okay that they could email or something or request some of the resources if they don't get a chance
Yes.
to write it down? Okay. These are the references that I used in pulling the presentation together this evening. And here we go. Here's our contact information for Healthy 365. Wait a minute. I have to apologize because I think what I want to give you with that information, I should have changed that on the slide, but I believe the information that we want to give you is not necessarily that phone number. And what it will do, Jess, is we'll change that slide maybe before it goes out after tonight, but I think we want the office phone number, don't we? Okay. So what we can do with that is we can get that office phone number and we'll get this slide corrected. I thought I had it with me. However,
It's 317-468-4231.
so the last four digits, 4231.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is the same.
Yep.
So actually the best way to contact is to call the office. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. We prefer that and not to use, is that right? Not to use that current email?
You can use the email and send it. We check it daily as well.
Okay.
But if you would prefer to call and talk to someone over the phone, you're welcome to use the phone as well.
Okay. And we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Really a good service to all of us that may need it. And also I would say, if we know of someone else that may need some help immediately, then it's a good resource. And of course, there's my phone number at Hancock Counseling and Psychiatry Office in Greenfield. And I think that's it. Thank you everyone for taking the time to be here this evening. And I hope that you've gained some helpful insight